You're listening to the AppleInsider podcast.
Welcome to a very special episode of the AppleInsider podcast. This is Monday, March 21st, and today was the day of the Apple event, and Eran Dilger attended. Daniel's with us, here to talk about it. Hi, Dan.
Hi. Hello from California, from Cupertino.
This was a really big event.
Well, it was, in terms of Apple events, kind of smaller in the venue.
Right. This was, in terms of the venue, this was held in the theater, the Town Hall Theater on the main campus. Is that right?
Right.
And that's the same theater where the iPod event was held years ago.
Yeah, he mentioned that in the being kind of like a historic thing. Most of the big events where they introduced an entirely new product have been somewhere else, either at Moscone Center or they threw special events like for the watch. They did that at the college here that's not far from Apple's campus, or some of the other larger events, spaces around the Bay Area. But this is kind of like their own on-campus thing. And they did a similar thing to last year where I actually parked behind the building where they usually let you in. And I don't know, that's not right. I had to go around to the other side. They were bringing people in through the front, the media. So you get you walk across campus and you got kind of this feel of being sort of intimately welcomed into Apple as opposed to being like snuck in through the back door to go to the theater.
It was interesting to me the way that Tim Cook opened the presentation today by beginning talking about the FBI and privacy.
Yeah, that's a big issue, and they're going to court tomorrow, and it's been consuming a lot of Apple's efforts. Just they've been. If you think about how much work everybody has to do to have all these high-level people. I mean, like the head of iOS and the head of iCloud, and everybody is coming, making public statements, devoting a lot of attention to think about how to approach this issue, because it is a big deal. If it gets blown through court, it could be just the way that things are going to be for a long time until a law can be changed. So it's a pretty pivotal issue for Apple.
It sure is. And besides Tim Cook's opening statement, where he talked about how they built the iPhone for us, the customer, and how it's a deeply personal device, and how the question is how much power the government should have, I noticed as they went through the different parts of iOS 9 and the 9.3 update that it seemed like at every step possible they talked about where privacy was being introduced to either the Notes app or to the care around privacy for ResearchKit and CareKit and things like this that were parts of the other announcements.
Yeah, really emphasizing that that's kind of central to having anything that works and being able to trust a system. You have to have the assurance that the information that you're entrusting into your device is protected in a variety of different ways. They've given a lot of thought to it. It's not just, here, try this. And then, there's so many online services and various things where you put all your information in it and then it just gets shared in ways you don't expect. So that's something that I think a lot of people are pushing back against. They don't like the idea of, investing their personal stuff into something that can be, used in ways that they don't anticipate.
Yes. Well, the first part of the announcement after that introduction was about the environment and some of the environmentally responsible efforts that Apple is making.
Yeah, it's kind of a sort of a halo. They mentioned a couple of different items, but they started off with Lisa Jackson. I think that's the first time she's been on stage giving a real presentation about what's happening. Most of what she's done has been kind of behind the scenes and lining things up. But it was kind of interesting to see that much devoted to, hey, before we show you stuff that you came to see, here's stuff that we also want you to pay attention to and to think about. And so the environment played a big role in that. And that's something Apple's been talking about for a while, but they haven't made it so much. It's something they've been doing for years before they even start talking about it. And I remember going to an event one time, I think it was a shareholder meeting, and there was some discussion about, I actually got to ask the question. I said, you're doing all these things. There's an awful lot going into the environment in what you're doing. Why don't you make more of a mention of this? And the kind of answer that I got, it was Steve Jobs was there, and also, Tim Cook. And it seemed like I got kind of the answer from both of them being like, we're doing what we think is the right thing to do. And we don't have to make a big issue about it. And I think they're realizing they do have to make an issue about it because the media didn't pick up on that by itself.
Well, I don't know that they have to make a big issue about it or make a big noise about it, but they certainly had a lot to make a noise about here, right? The goal to become 100% renewable in all of their operations worldwide, in everything that they do. And the fact that they have achieved 93% of that to date is gargantuan. I mean, that's almost inconceivable, right? That means that they've addressed this in the U.S., in China, in Ireland, wherever they are, and in all of the retail stores. And that's not a small task by any stretch of the imagination.
It's huge. And to coordinate that globally, it's been going on for a long time, though. I mean, they've been working towards that as a goal for a long time. It's just, I think now it's not that they're making a big deal about it, but they're making it a more obviously presented thing. It used to be something that you could find out about, and then it was something that they put on their website. And now they're opening, here's a new product. And by the way, we're going to tell you, this is one of the things that we care about, is that we're creating products that are not only powered in a sustainable way, but also can be, we think about the lifestyle or the life cycle of the product. And that once it's first of all reused, and then when it gets to the end of its lifespan, we've designed it to be easy to dismantle in an efficient way so that the parts can be reused.
Okay, so now you're talking about the Project Liam that they showed.
Yeah, it was kind of reminded me of the Pixar robots.
Was it the Pixar robots, or did it remind you of the
WALL-E?
The lamp?
WALL-E, kind of like.
Oh, okay. You were thinking of WALL-E. I was thinking it kind of in some ways looked like the lamp that hops across the screen.
Yeah, Luxo.
Yes, Luxo Jr. But the idea that the robot can disassemble and detect all the different materials it's disassembling and sort it and separate them back to its core components is pretty huge. It means that if you can build a robot that dismantles it responsibly, you could probably also build a robot that could assemble it responsibly.
Yeah, it was pretty cool how they presented it too, like pulling out the screws and then sucking them up through a tube into a pile. I mean, some of that's presentation to make it look cool. But
you think that's movie magic?
Well, I mean, that's how you do it. I mean, right. Makes sense. So it's kind of issues you don't think about in terms of whenever you've taken a device apart, it's a lot of work.
Right. But,
actually, if you had a device that was, if you have devices that are all exactly the same, it's quite easy to make it's much easier to make a machine that can take them apart.
Well, yes.
So,
as long as it knows which product it's looking at, it can identify what the process is for disassembly and take it apart from there.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me because in the earlier versions of the iPhone, it was quite simple to disassemble them. And with the more current ones, it's gotten harder and more difficult. And to have a robot be able to do that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It also answers the question, what happens with the phones from the upgrade plans, right? Because we've gone away from that 2-year contract subsidized model, and there have been a lot of upgrade plans. Where does the old phone go?
Well, one of the directions that they're working on with old phones is to reuse them in other countries. And that's what the big push in India is.
They mentioned that. They mentioned that for China as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge market for affordable phones. And because iPhones, they don't immediately become useless. But when there is that rapid pace of development, people want the newest thing. And there's a lot of people. I mean, I know people that buy a new phone every year. And I think
you're one of them.
The mainstream, yeah, the mainstream. I'm kind of a freak, but the mainstream, even my family that never bought new things all the time, they're always buying a new iPhone because first of all, you break it. Second of all, there's just such a compelling upgrade cycle of, the camera gets so much better every year and things get so much faster. And it's not, I can't think of another product that's quite the same in terms of people consistently buying it for, the iPhone is now 8 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
And people have been buying cycles of them every year. And in other countries, there's people that haven't had a smartphone before. And so that's a huge untapped market that you have to be able to address in a way that people can afford to buy. So if you take hand-me-downs, there's a great solution to both problems.
This is what Joswiak, I think, was talking about with the iPhone SE, which is the new 4-inch phone. And Neil and I were talking about this in the back channel that, why would you even consider buying an iPhone 6 when you could get the more powerful phone for less in the iPhone SE?
Yeah, I think they've noted. I mean, there hasn't been a direct comparison because the 5 and the S and the 6s were never on the same generation. But in general, every release that Apple's made, everyone's buying the latest thing. And remember, even when the 5S came out, there was this kind of idea that the majority of people were going to be buying the 5C, which was not tremendously different. It didn't have as fast of a chip, and it didn't have some of the other features. But it was, similarly good. It was just the year before. And that wasn't the case. I mean, they actually the media kind of invented the story that the 5C was a failure because it didn't outsell the more expensive model. And really the real story was that Apple came out with two models of a phone and everybody bought the fancier, newer one. And that's kind of carried forward. And with the 6 Plus, people have kind of pushed upward in what they're buying. So Apple's average selling prices for iPhones has been going up, which is kind of incredible because every other industry, particularly in the tech industry, the average selling price of devices is plummeting, whether it's PCs or phones or tablets or anything. And Apple's not doing that. So it's pretty incredible that they can consistently come out with new products that get people to upgrade.
And I think the 4-inch iPhone SE is a pretty incredible offering because it's got everything that the 6S or 6S Plus has in it pretty much. I mean, it's the A9 processor, it's the Motion Pro processor, it's got all of the goods in it. It's got the camera. There's no good reason not to have that phone.
Well, the one thing it doesn't have is the 3D Touch, which is kind of one of the features that Apple's been pushing with the newest 6S. I'm trying to think if there was something else. It escapes me if there's another kind of significant differentiator.
Very competent phone, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much in line with not just the 6, but the 6S. I mean, it has like the newest camera, the newest chip, and having less resolution, it's actually going to be faster in terms of some benchmarks.
Right, that was something you noticed with your iPhone 6 Plus because you were trying to push that larger screen.
Right. So there's people that just naturally like a smaller phone. And, I was handling it and remembering what it was like to have a phone that you could reach without stretching your thumbs. And even though I have huge hands, I do notice with the 6 Plus, it's frequently this kind of huge stretch across the screen to get anything done. But it's also difficult to give up that big screen. So I don't know.
They covered ResearchKit and how great ResearchKit has been in terms of increasing the amount of participation in research studies. Tell me about CareKit.
So CareKit, it was kind of interesting the way they presented it, showing that with ResearchKit, you can put in a lot of information about what's happening, and they can find out, they can draw conclusions based on all that data that they have. And they can see, for example, that, if you're doing this, this is the result. And if you're taking this particular drug, it may help you. It may not help you. It may be that that's not the right drug for you. And that's the kind of natural evolution of that is for people who are not in intensive care anymore, coming out of the hospital, out of surgery or something like that, or who are sent home, having something that can monitor how they react to drug therapy or how they're dealing with different issues and some of the same types of measurements that are related to ResearchKit, but instead of just looking at an issue, they're looking specifically at how people who are, for example, sent home from a hospital, how they're responding to an ongoing treatment and whether or not that needs to be changed, whether it's working for them, and whether something else can be done that would help more. And kind of the biggest example is coming home from surgery. And I've gone through surgery a few times, and every time, they give you this piece of paper that says, here's other things that could happen, and
here's your post-treatment care plan.
Do this so you don't die. Avoid this and avoid that. But having kind of active monitoring, it's sort of like bringing the hospital home with you. So that's a really interesting concept that nobody has really kind of been predicting where that's gone. Because even ResearchKit was kind of a new thing when that came out. No one expected it to happen.
And so what has to take place for that to really get adopted? I mean, what do doctors and hospitals have to do differently for that to become a thing?
Well, I think it'll be related to specific hospitals, and as they see value in doing it, it's like any tool. Once you put a tool out there, you have early adopters that start seeing results, and then you have other people that observe that and say, "Hey, we need to do that too because it's such a big deal." And there's so many areas in computing where that has been the case. I mean, it was kind of obvious from the early days of PCs that for accounting, being able to have, this like a spreadsheet or a database where you could immediately do things you couldn't do on paper before. And so that's kind of another example of that, finding another way to have our smartphones, which are full of it's not just a computer, but it also has all these sensors on it.
It's a good data acquisition device.
Yeah. And, you can send it right to your doctor. And so it's a smart application that Apple's kind of unique in presenting that.
Next, they ran through a series of updates, right? They seemed to go through this really quickly as we were doing it. And they went through tvOS and talked about tvOS getting folders, getting dictation support for things like username and passwords, and Siri being applied to a broader and broader series of apps.
Yeah, all those are things in the public beta. I believe it's public.
Yes.
It's a developer beta.
There was a public beta.
So those are not things that we didn't know about, but it was kind of an update across the board in terms of software of new things that are coming out with a batch update.
I think one of my big complaints about Apple TV and tvOS has been the App Store and the difficulty of searching the App Store. And so being able to use Siri to not only ask for an app by name, but also to ask for a kind of app.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
I'm waiting to see. I'm going to test it a little bit later on and see how helpful that is.
And, you think about it, the TV App Store has been around for a few months. It's pretty new. And pretty much almost every time that I go to check out something on TV, I go and there's some new thing that is interesting enough to download.
They have over 5,000 apps on the App Store for TV.
Yeah.
For having only been out for just a few short months, that is not terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And also just once you have that many apps, it's kind of like when the App Store first came out on the iPhone. And the first thing you do is download a bunch of apps, and then you're like, oh, I have a bunch of apps I have to figure out how to manage. So the idea of folders and then being able to pull up apps by voice with Siri, it's just kind of this evolving, how do you deal with success?
Yeah.
You create a new problem and then you have to solve it.
Definitely. And after tvOS, they covered we covered iOS 9.
And that too was like 9.3, the new stuff that we've known about. I mean, those things we've already covered, and Apple's even presented before, but it's out now. So,
and they were small changes that they chose to focus on, right? They chose to focus on notes and the ability to password protect it, fingerprint protect it. They talked about health and the ability to give people app recommendations to help get even better data into the health dashboard, and making news personalized, which was cool. They spent some time talking about Night Shift. Can you tell me about Night Shift?
Night Shift is the idea of changing the representation of how colors are displayed based on the time of the day. So you have a less, intensely bright blue screen when you're at night reading in bed. So it kind of dials it down with the idea of making it it's more soothing and your brain is ready to go to sleep.
My understanding is that light fools your brain into thinking that it's daylight and you should be awake, and that especially the blue component of the light is particularly fatiguing and also prompts you to stay awake. And so by dialing it back, that it's going to help you get to sleep better. Yeah,
it's like your whole serotonin, melatonin cycle of light influences how your wake cycle is. So it's interesting to kind of, and it was a third-party app, I believe. That
Flux, Flux.
Yeah, so Apple kind of Sherlocked it. I mean, they kind of borrowed it, but they've also expanded upon that in sort of a new way with the new iPad Pro.
Mm-hmm. They have ambient light sensors, and it's True Tone,
which is kind of a interesting play on. It's the same thing with the flash of when you're taking a photo, when you need a flash, being able to match the lighting to make it the most flattering tone. So it's kind of in the opposite direction, that it's changing the kind of light used to illuminate the display to sort of mimic the ambient lighting around you.
I paid attention to the announcement about CarPlay, and I'm a big CarPlay fan. It was nice to see that there are more than 100 car models that have been announced with CarPlay support, and that all of the major manufacturers are putting CarPlay into their systems, and that with iOS 9.3, music gets better, maps gets better, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those in practice.
Yeah, I wish I had CarPlay in my car.
Well, do you still have the BMW?
Yeah, but it's like a 2011, so it doesn't really. It's not. I mean, I could put an iPad in my car, I guess. But.
No, and actually, I know someone who came up with a way to actually run the CarPlay interface on the iPad. So you could totally do that.
They also make aftermarket ones, but
I
need to get rid of my car before the real impact of not having maintenance on it anymore hits me.
No, I have the aftermarket car.
If anybody wants to buy a car,
contact Dan at They touched on iPads in education, and to be honest, that part of the announcement flew past me. All I really got out of that is that they're updating the OS so that people using iPads in education have more tools for students, teachers, and administrators. I'm not even sure what it means, other than it becomes easier to manage when you have a large number of users.
Well, they've already presented that. That's one of the main components of iOS 9.3 is that classroom functionality of basically having, I believe it's cloud driven, but an educator can set up an account and manage classroom iPads, kind of similar to previous management tools for Macs. So you can decide what apps students have access to and what they can install on there, and you can do screen sharing and see where people are in the classroom individually. You can look at what they're doing and offer help, kind of things like that.
Cool.
So they're starting with education. That's something that would be kind of eventually broadly interesting to corporate users and also even home users in some circumstances. But I think they're working to kind of dial it in for education first, because that's a big part of their market for
the sort of family iTunes App Store accounts have always been a little bit weird to manage. So maybe that's something that trickles down to the rest of us. Yeah,
I mean, they've kind of been congealing the family plans and figuring out how to do it. There's still some things that it's not really clear what the solution is. For example, photos. Your entire family might not want to pool all their photos in the same library. You might not want to see your kids' photos. But if you're in a family and you and your spouse want to take pictures and put them into the same library, there's not a clear solution for that yet. And so that's still something that they're working on. So see how that works out.
Once again, we had Tim Cook laying it out very clearly that he said, we believe the iPad is the perfect expression of the future of personal computing. Absolutely no equivocation there. This is it. This is where we're going. So they talked about how much they love the iPad and how great the iPad Pro is. What can you tell me about the ultimate PC replacement?
Well, with the new iPad Pro, I mean, essentially what they're doing is upgrading what they call the iPad Air into a device more like the full-size iPad Pro that they came out with last year, which is kind of a pattern of what they do. They come out with a high-end, here's our newest, greatest stuff, kind of like when the 5K iMac came out. And it's like, here's the incredible screen and, everything, but it was a 27-inch. If you wanted a smaller one, you had to wait until it kind of trickled down through the line. And so that's kind of the similar pattern of what's happening here came out with a larger iPad with a premium price. It has support for the pencil stylus and some of the new stuff that requires having a faster chip, and then bringing that down to the regular size iPad, which they kind of emphasize has been the most popular version.
Yeah. Did you have did you get your hands on with the smaller iPad Pro?
Yeah, I worked with it a little bit. I was kind of watching. It's kind of hard to film and play with at the same time, so I was having the guy give me a professional tour of it while I was filming.
I noticed it has the camera bump on the back.
Yeah, it's the same camera as the 6.
So if you're going to lie it flat and draw on it, is that a problem? Does it rock and wobble from side to side?
Not tremendously, but a lot of people put a case in the back too. I mean, you have like a rubberized case. That's what I have on the iPad Pro that I have. So if you do that, I mean, it's the same thing with the iPad Pro.
Okay.
It has kind of a little bump out.
So it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of there.
I mean, you can notice it. It's not like a top. It's not impossible to lay on a surface, but if you want to have a smooth surface, putting it in the case kind of solves that problem.
Yeah. Now, what did the small iPad Pro get anything that the large one pre-existing model doesn't have?
Well, they're talking about the screen technology, and that's changed. I don't know if it's exactly the same as the Pro, but it's got a few upgrades over what it had before that are in addition to the support for the pencil, which includes a greater gamut ratio, color gamut. Mm-hmm. So produces a wider range of colors. Looked incredible when I was working on it. The other thing that I noticed, one thing that it doesn't have, I believe, I mean, I've been seeing this on Twitter and looking at the specs, I think this is correct. the new Pro doesn't have USB 3 internally, where the larger size Pro does.
How would they know?
Well, I mean, what it has is support for it. Oh, you mean how do the reports know?
Yeah,
I think it's public on the website.
I mean, the point of the new camera.
I saw it on the internet, so it must be true.
Nice.
No, but I thought somebody tweeted out. I haven't looked into this into detail, but somebody tweeted out a picture that looked like specs, or I don't remember. I mean, this is kind of stuff I went through kind of quickly, but it looked like the Pro is said to have support for USB 3, and the other one does not say it has support for USB 3. So I don't know if that's definitive or if it's just the way that it's configured to work right now or what.
Or just the way that the material was written up.
It's possible, but when I looked at it, it looked like it was kind of like a clear case of this is something that it doesn't have. Because some of the adapters, even right now, you can't have a USB 3 cable plugged into it. I mean, there are no specific USB 3 cables to do, for example, syncing over USB 3.
Right. There's no Lightning USB-A USB 3 cable.
Exactly. So that's not happening yet, but apparently that's possible.
I mean, the camera adapters were redone to support USB 3.
Yeah. And that's what I think the detail came from is the camera adapters, when it says when you use it with the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, it uses USB 2.
Intriguing.
So I don't know if that's a hard, fast thing that will never work or if it's just the current status of how it's working. But that kind of sounded like, which I don't know why that would be the case, because it seems like USB 3 support would be part of the A9X processors, as I understand it, because the system on a chip has all the interfaces built into it.
The nice thing about the new camera kit is that the USB side of the camera kit for connecting to a camera has a Lightning female port, so you can charge the iPad while you're using the camera.
That's smart. And you can use it for more than just, I mean, they mentioned that too. It's like, instead of just having something you can plug a camera into, you can also use that for things like microphones to do podcasting. Okay. So it actually has a real USB port now.
When they said, and to do your podcast right from your iPad Pro, you know that all of our hearts over here at the Apple Insider podcast lit up a little bit.
Yeah, everybody got excited.
Yeah, our hearts grew about 2 sizes that day.
Yeah, that's something that's been kind of lacking. You know, you think of podcasting, think of Apple, and you think of the iPad, you think, why shouldn't you be able to podcast on this?
Absolutely, and we've tried to do it. We've run into a number of problems while we've tried to do it. So it's good to hear that they have this in mind.
Baby steps.
Well, you know us. We're going to try and figure out and see if we can actually do it this way. But they say this is the best upgrade ever for every iPad owner and the ultimate PC upgrade for all the people using old PCs. Yeah,
that's their target market, is trying to get everyone to... I mean, there's not a huge new market for people rushing out and buying their first computer anymore, outside of some developing countries, where in China that is actually the case. There's a lot of people that are buying their first phone and first computer kind of thing. But, you know, for most of the world, you have to entice people who are using an old PC into buying into the new decade.
Yeah, and there were people that in the comments on our website were a little disappointed that they heard nothing about Mac. And of course, we all kind of knew that this was not going to be a Mac event. But what do you have to say about that in light of the ultimate iPad comments? The iPad is the future of computing.
Well, they did touch on a lot of different things. It was all about iOS, though. I mean, all the product introductions they made were all iOS related. And in previous, they have issued Macs. I believe Macs and iPads are generally presented separately, although I think there has been times where they've introduced 2 different things at once. I think the MacBook, wasn't the MacBook released alongside new iPads?
I think it was.
I can't remember exactly, but if there's not a new Mac to be issued right now,
right,
it's kind of like a natural situation.
But as the iPad Pro becomes this plentiful thing, and it will be because they've put it into the most popular size now. Do you think that spells anything out for the Mac's future?
Well, there is certainly an emphasis on mainstream, the things that Apple's actually going to sell. So obviously they're going to put most of their interest into developing the things that the broadest part of the market is going to buy. But I think it's also, I mean, Apple has kind of emphasized that high-end Macs are not going to go away. It's not the idea. It was originally they were making a strong point that iPads and Macs don't have to merge, because everyone's talking, I mean, especially Microsoft was pushing this idea that, oh, we can have a tablet and a laptop in the same thing. And Apple's been like, no, that's a refrigerator toaster. You don't really want that. You want to have either this or that. So kind of moving past not merging, I think they've also kind of been fairly strong about the fact that these are different devices and one of them doesn't have to go away, even though Apple sells, 50 to 60 million iPads a year and maybe 20 million Macs. So, I mean, iPads are much bigger. And people talk about iPads going away, and it's like, even from their peak, Apple's still selling lots more iPads. However, both iPads and Macs as businesses generate a similar number of billions of dollars. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's like 25 billion for both of them, in that ballpark. So they're both big businesses. The iPad is a bigger volume business, and the Mac is a more valuable because Macs are more expensive. But they're both huge enterprises that Apple's not in any hurry to get rid of either one, obviously, or to turn them into the same thing,
Got it. Okay, so let's recap. There was climate change, there was CareKit, there were cool new bands for the Apple Watch, and updates for Apple TV, iPhone SE, and the iPad Pro. What do you think the takeaway here is today? What first of all, what do you think was the best announcement of the day, and what do you think was the one that's going to have the most impact going forward?
Well, all these were sort of kind of incremental advances of saying, here we're taking our, kind of trailing at this point low-end iPhone and bringing it up to speed with our other high-end iPhones, and delivering it at an even better price for starters. That there's nothing incredibly exciting about that, but it's also exciting in the sense that it's broadening the market for iPhones. Because one thing Apple needs to do, in addition to making the tons of money it does, is it has to keep growing. And to be able to keep growing in terms of volume, you have to be aware of new markets. And so I think it's not the most exciting, sexy news, but it still shows that Apple's very aware of what's happening and where the actual needs are. And then with the iPad, it's kind of the similar thing of we've pushed the iPad into the future with its iPad Pro platform, and now we're bringing in the mainstream up to that same level. So Pen works across devices. You have a lot of new things you couldn't do before in terms of windowing and some of the multitasking features. So in terms of kind of excitement level or how big and new things were, even before the event, there were all these people running to their typewriters to type out, oh, Apple's event's going to be boring. What Apple does, Apple's not this small company it was 10 years ago that's, relatively small, that it needs to create a big news circus just to get people to pay attention to its products anymore. Apple's running the show, kind of. They sell all the tablets, all the notebooks, all the phones that make money in the world. So they have to be cautious about the decisions that they make, so that what the volume that they're producing is something people actually buy. They can't just go out and build sort of experimental, whizzy new things that nobody buys. It would be awful if Apple started making exciting products like, the Fire Phone and Windows Surface and things that, people are going, oh, this is new, but it doesn't sell.
Yeah,
that's a problem. So I think focusing on what they're good at and really targeting that for who the real consumers are out there, and then also emphasizing some of the important things that Apple is doing in terms of looking at health and looking at privacy and looking at running their business in a sustainable way, so that the only reason to buy Apple is not just that they have new exciting technology products, but that they're also kind of a responsible corporate citizen that is concerned about the world in a participating sort of way. It's not just we're just trying to produce the most junk so that people will buy this and the planet will just go away eventually, but creating a sort of sustainable lifestyle that a lot of other high-end retailers and clothiers and people who make amazing food, that's the kind of things that they focus on. And that's something that the consumers that matter, the people that are paying money for stuff, also care about. And so Apple is really showing a lot of savvy in what they're doing. And I don't think it's just for show. I mean, some of it is for show. I mean, they're showing it off. But at the same time, it's also like a real concern of, if we do this, people are going to notice and they're going to be attracted to it.
Your parting thought coming out of today's announcements.
Let's see. What kind of brilliant thing can I say? My brain is kind of out of brilliance, but I do think it's interesting that Apple is continuing to pursue this kind of welcoming sense to bring the media in and show them things. And like, especially kind of, it seems kind of simple, but just walking people across the campus and being like, this is what Apple is. And, the way they throw breakfast, and it's not just like, here's a sandwich, croissant, and a coffee, but here's our sense of what we think is responsible food. And it's presented in a way that's healthy, and it's presented in a way that's attractive. And that's kind of a reflection of the products Apple makes. They don't just dump out, here's something that makes money because it costs less to produce than what we sold it for, but they put a lot of thought into how it's used and how it affects the world and how it affects people that use it. And the fact that people will want it again and they'll keep buying it, and Apple will effectively make money doing that. And we've seen that. I mean, that's kind of a pattern. And I think people I've seen some responses where they talk about, it's like Apple's not doing exciting, earth-shattering things. They don't have to do that all the time. And if that's all they focused on, they'd be more likely to be failing, because it's hard to always to do something incredibly new and be successful at it. Sometimes you have to work on refining the craft that you already have. And I think Apple's showing that they're really good at that. And so it may be another, we're going into the next 40s of Apple. They're just about to turn 40 as a company in April. And so in their next decade, what are they going to do? How are they going to solve new problems? And I think they're kind of charting, here's kind of our values of what we're going towards. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dan. And thank you for all of your help covering the Siege event. Where can we find you on the internet?
AppleInsider, of course. And then also I'm on Twitter at Daniel Eran, ERAN, various other places.
Well, this has been the Apple Insider podcast, recording Monday, March 21st, following the Apple iPhone SE event. Stay tuned to Apple Insider for more coverage of the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, the 4-inch iPhone SE, live from Apple's headquarters in Cupertino.